Good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing this morning? We encourage that you use the chat below to keep the engagement going so we can have some feedback and we can have further engagement as well. So welcome, everybody. Good morning, good morning. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes just to get everybody in. I think we can get started. Well, today is our very first talk, our Power Talk with Jay. And if a lot of you don't know who I am the current president for Advocis Calgary. And I wanted to say thank you so much for lending me your ears this morning for 15 minutes and your minds. Today is one of those topics that is near and dear to me and has helped me in my career. And I am so incredibly happy to share this with you. So the topic today we are going to discuss is self-reflection and self-evaluation. Now, the difference between the two is self-reflection is the insight about yourself and your behavior, your values, your knowledge. Self-evaluation, on the other hand, is it's to study your performance. How do you show up every day? You know, that's the evaluation. Day-to-day operations. What do you do? How do you do it? So let's talk about self-reflection first. Now, a lot of people may or may not like personality tests, and I think they are an incredible tool to have. There are some free tests online that you can take. There is one particular company called Insight Discovery, and this is what they look like. And I had an opportunity to do this. This one asks about 20 questions, but boy, those 20 questions really dig deep into understanding who you are. We are currently in talks with Discovery Insight to see if this is something that we can provide as a value for our members at Advocis. So I will stay in touch to see if that actually pans through. If you have a spouse or somebody that you know that actually has this that you can pay for and do this test, it is an incredible tool to have. But in the meantime, there are some personality tests. We're going to put it in the chat that you can do as a free test that you can at least get started on that end. And the three important questions to really ask is, who am I? What do I stand for? And how do I show up? So one of the things that I have done, and it took a couple of hours out of my day, but what I did was I actually took this test and I really read through my personality. And it's amazing how much we are blind to the things that we know that we need to work on, but we are also blinded by how deep it is. And so the very first thing that I did was I put down my blind spots and what the solutions are. So essentially, I created two columns: blind spots and solutions. So here's an example. I get easily distracted. So what is the solution to that? Well, I need to create a discipline. And so I use what's called the 60/1 rule. So Robin Sharma actually came up with this rule. So I block out 60 minutes in my calendar and I put it in my calendar so I know it's there. So if there's something that I need to do, in those 60 minutes, I pick one thing that I have to get done. And it's usually the distraction comes when there's a difficult concept that I needed to learn. So I implemented that. So I block out that time, and it was incredible how much, when I concentrated that time, how much I achieved at the end of that hour. The next thing was weaknesses. So you put weakness on one column, what skill do I need to overcome this weakness? And what strengths do I currently have? So those are 3 columns. So an example would be, let's say you're talking with a client and you need to investigate the situation a little bit further. The only way you can do that is by asking important, right questions. So you need to dig deeper. So I had a hard time doing that. So I put that in the column, investigate the situation further, deeper problems. How do I do that? Well, I sat down and made a list of asking probing questions, the right questions, by being curious. And then what strengths do I need? Well, it's putting a sticker on my computer when I'm doing my Zoom call to say, ask why all the time. So when you're meeting with a client, you always ask why. And when you ask those questions, you actually your conversations become much more meaningful. The next column was, what skills and knowledge do I already have that I need to keep improving? So this one is very important because sometimes we think we're very good at this. We don't need to look at it. We don't need to concentrate on it. And sometimes it becomes a substandard and we need to become exceptional, especially the ones that the strengths that are so incredibly important that we are very good at. So building credibility was one of them. I'm very good at building credibility, but how do I take that a step further? How do I maybe utilize technology, for example, so that they take over certain tasks so that I can continue to build credibility? Perhaps maybe sending emails and saying happy birthday to my clients, I can sit down and write an actual card and send it through snail mail. So these are just some examples. Now, the next one is, what am I doing to keep up in my field? Well, we have lots of educational programs through Advocis, outside of Advocis, through your MGA. Those are really good. A lot of times we can do leadership or we can do other courses that are outside our field to get a different perspective. The next one would be, what skills and knowledge I would like to add that would help me either personally or professionally. One of the biggest one was time management. And so I needed to really hone down on my time so that I can be present for everyone that's involved in my life. The next one would be, what strengths would I like to cultivate? So one of the ones that I put down in my list was grit. I wanted to cultivate that strength and become better at it. So all of these things, what I did was I put them on a piece of paper, or you can put them on a computer, however you learn. I actually went through this every single morning for almost 3 months until it became innate and that I was able to do this without looking at it. Then I would look at it on a quarterly basis in case I needed to change a few things or add a few things. It was probably one of the most powerful things for me to change the way I was doing things. And the most important it changed my behavior. And that was the growth that I needed. So I think that is incredibly useful in trying to get a personality test to really dig deep on sort of where you are for self-reflection. Self-evaluation, it's a completely different way of looking at it. It's the way you show up and it's your performance on an everyday level. So there's a gentleman called Tim Ferriss, and he had this amazing way of doing no self sort of New Year's resolution. What he did was a past review, which was incredible. And I started to apply that. What it is you create 2 columns. You can call it positive, negative. You can call it success or challenges. And when you create these 2 columns, what you do is you go through your calendar from the last year and you go down, if you can go down every week and look at every week and really ask yourself which meetings, what activities, what administrative work, rework, commitments that triggered a positive or negative performance for that month. And then what you do is you place them in the respective columns. And then you ask yourself, what 20% of each column produced the most reliable, powerful, productive, meaningful performance? And what you do is you try to duplicate that. You try to, now when you go into the new year, you start, when you did the reflection, now you know how to go and plan your new year. I thought this was a great way of looking at it. So what I've done is I did start off doing past year reviews. And so now what I've done is that I do past quarterly reviews so that I can stay on top of the changes that I think that are important that need to be done immediately. So every quarter I go back, I take one day, I put it in my calendar, and I take one day and I go back and say, what have I done that is the most effective, the most impactful, the most meaningful, and how can I duplicate that? And there is a really, really brilliant quote by Mark Twain. Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. Now, there's two things to this quote. It's not necessarily telling you not to go on the side of the majority or to stay. What it is, it's just to pause and reflect. I think a lot of times we have not enough time to do that because we're so inundated with so much information. It's information overload. We are doing too many things in one day. And I think that if you set some time aside just to pause and reflect, to see that, do you need to be on the side of the majority or do you need to look in a different way and do things differently? And Tim Ferriss also has this stress test. And I think these are very impactful questions that he asked. And there's 17 of them, but we're not going to talk about all 17. For today's purpose, I'd like to just talk about 4. And these questions is something that you can take and really dig deeper. So the first one is, what if I did the opposite for 48 hours? What kind of results do you think that you can get if you do something differently? It's that whole saying, if you're doing the same thing and getting the same results, maybe it's time to change. And this is one way of posing that question. The second one would be, what are the worst things that could happen? And could I get back here again? Sometimes it's important to look at the worst case scenario, plan for it, and then you have a way of getting back. Sometimes our brains need to work that way, but staying in the worst case scenario is not where you need to be, but thinking about it is important. The third question is, if I could only work 2 hours per week on my business, what would I do? This is powerful because I think a lot of times we go through our business and some things become so automated that we know we have to do this and we're trying to do 10 different things and we don't concentrate on working on our business. And I typically do this on Fridays because I've dedicated that time, and I'll take an hour to 2 hours to really go back and say, what can I do better? Where are my bridges that I need to gap? The last question is, what if I could only subtract to solve problems? So is there something that I can delete in order to become more effective, in order to become more productive? Sometimes we think that adding more things just to solve a problem is actually not really the case. So maybe take a step back and say, what can I eliminate? And then move forward from there. We are very close to our 15 minutes. I wanted to take the last 2 minutes to see if there was any questions or comments or some, engaging. Please put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. I would love to hear from you guys. Quiet crowd today.
I can go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Allison, we can hear you.
Oh, good. So I heard you very clearly when you said that you find yourself easily distracted. I find myself constantly distracted, especially when I'm in front of a computer and I end up going down a rabbit hole. And one of the things that I've tried to do to prevent that or minimize that is to put on a timer. So if I'm going to get sucked into Facebook or some social media thing, I have a timer set for 60 seconds. And if I choose to go another 60 seconds, then I can. I find that by limiting myself in terms of how much social media or computer rabbit holes I'm going to go down, putting on a timer is very helpful.
And that's an excellent tool. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think these are the types of tools that we have to, it's all about trial and error. So if it works for you, you should embrace it and put a timer on. And for me, my timer is I take 60 minutes out of my day to really turn off everything else and really concentrate on the topic that I need to work on. So thank you so much for sharing that, Allison. That's amazing. Well, I know that it is 9:15 and being respectful of your time, I'd like to leave you with one thought. Keep showing up in a remarkable way. Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.